Hi, I am Ashutosh. Welcome to Fault Lines. The price of bread was high, out of the reach of common people. They were hungry, and they were angry. Angry at the apathy of their rulers who were living the life of luxury and opulence while they themselves were starving. A group of women, perhaps unable to bear the suffering of their children, came out in the marketplace and began rioting for bread. Other women joined in, and the number grew. Some men joined too. As their strength and confidence grew, they began thinking of a more permanent solution to the problem they were facing. After all, one cannot riot for bread every day, but one does get hungry every day. The permanent solution required change in the system, and the change in the system required some sort of revolution. Revolution required weapons, so they headed for the armory and looted guns. Armed, the women marched for about 20 kilometers outside the city, where in a palace the king was living. They brought him back from his luxurious palace to the city and demanded of him to do something about their plight. The city was Paris, the year was 1789, and it was the beginning of the French Revolution, the beginning of the idea of the nation. 4 years later, in 1793, King Louis was arrested and executed. This was not the first time that the people rose against their rulers. But there was something different this time. What happened then set it apart from anything else in the history before. It set in motion events which would change the world forever. Earlier, when a king died, abdicated, or was dethroned, he was replaced by some other king, and things went on as before. But this time, there were to be no more kings. The whole political system had to be changed. No more kings, no more divine authority. People refused to be subjects and wanted to be free citizens. It would take another 100 years or so for the idea to be fully realized. But with the French Revolution, it was clear that the days of monarchy were numbered. The 18th century was the century of the scientific revolution in Europe. The advancement in science challenged the traditional beliefs and values, as well as the institutions which upheld these values, like the church or the monarchy. The scientific revolution also produced technologies in the field of transportation, trade and commerce, weaponry, which led to the prosperity of a group of people. The middle class was formed. It consisted of skilled individuals who were increasingly becoming influential and shaping society. They were driven by the principles of hard work, thrift, self-reliance. Kings and princes, whose only merit in life was to be born into a certain family, and who lived like parasites on the labor of the common people, did not suit the spirit of the time. They were becoming irrelevant and undesirable. So they had to be dispensed with. The political system, monarchy, which had propped them up, had to be replaced. But the big question was, what would replace it? What kind of political system would take its place? What would be the form and shape of the new political system? And herein lay the birth of the idea of the nation. A nation was to be composed of a group of people who had a shared history, a common language, common ethnicity. In other words, some marker of collective identity which defined them as one people. Unlike the earlier princely states where kings and monarchs decided the borders of the country through wars, marriage relations, etc., and common people had no say in the matter. Now, the borders of the country would be decided by a shared common cultural identity. But the problem was, there is no such thing as a common cultural identity. A society, unless it's very primitive and secluded, completely secluded from the outside world, is always composed of diverse groups of people who have their own unique languages, ethnicities, and cultures. In other words, there is never one people occupying a single geographical space the size of a nation. At the time of the French Revolution, not even half of the people living in France spoke French. Similar conditions existed in other so-called nations of Europe, where the idea of nation state originated first. All major cities were melting pots of different cultures and languages. Even in small towns and villages, different communities had been living together for centuries. The realities on the ground complicated the idea of a nation having a singular shared identity. So it had to be imagined. Selective and rigid versions of the national past were created and spread to the masses through school education, mass media, and other propaganda tools. Those who didn't fit in the fossilized, fictionalized version of a common identity became outsiders and suspects. They became a threat to the project of nation building. They had to be assimilated, coerced into submission, or even physically exterminated. Since the birth of the nation, it has been just one long series of genocides and massacres which continued even today. The scourge, which began in Europe and then spread to other parts of the world, has wreaked havoc like nothing else before. The worst atrocities were committed in the name of the nation. 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the Armenian genocide, the Rwandan genocide, massacres of Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs during the partition of India. The list can go on and on and on. But despite this, nation is the strongest marker of our collective identity today, and will continue to be so in the foreseeable future. Whether we like it or not, we will have to deal with its fallouts. It would be just great if we learn from our history and not make the same mistakes again. But learning from the past, it's asking too much of ourselves, isn't it? The best we can do is to change the form of the nation. We can step away from ethnic, cultural nationalism and move towards constitutional nationalism. A nation doesn't belong to a group of people having one cultural identity, because there is no such thing, but to everyone who lives within its borders and abides by the law of the land. Irrespective of color, religion, or ethnicity, people enjoy rights and fulfill obligations that they collectively and democratically chose to take upon themselves. Shorn of its tribalistic, parochial elements, nation can be a positive force. It can provide us with a sense of belongingness and cohesion, which is our fundamental need and sorely lacking in our own time. Perhaps Nelson Mandela summed up best when he said, "Part of building a new nation means building a spirit of tolerance, love, and respect among us, the people of this country." And if we have tolerance, love, and respect for the people of our own country, there is no reason why the same sentiment cannot be extended to the peoples of other countries. Thank you very much for your time.